Yo, what's going on, everyone? Brian and Jim here with Drink a Beer and Play a Game, and welcome to our second in the Shadowrun review series. Today, we're checking out the Sega Genesis title, Shadowrun. And as a side note, Jim is probably going to be creaming his pants the entire review.
Released in 1994, this was developed by Blue Sky Software and published by Sega. Once again, this is based on the tabletop RPG by FASA. And if you want more information about the world, check the link in the top right corner where we discuss the world and backstory of the Shadowrun universe. This game is a completely different monster than the Super NES game, with a brand new control scheme, new story, new characters, new everything. And it happens to be one of my favorite games of all time. Let's get into it.
Like Jim mentioned, this is completely different than the Super NES. You have a top-down view, and I gotta admit, the actual characters in the game, they're actually highly detailed, and I gave it some credit for that. The majority of the setting in this game is once again a dystopian, broken-down city, but you can explore caves, bars, corporate offices, and even this random jungle wooded area.
Brian's called to Salish today!
Goddamn nerd!
Ow, it's also based in Seattle!
And I'll even give it credit, the silhouettes of all the characters you interact with are fairly well drawn. My biggest complaint was they didn't seem to have that many, so they reused a lot of them, but there's really not a whole lot to complain about. They just recycled a lot of those backgrounds I just mentioned. Yes, you might go into a whole handful of different bars, but it's pretty much the same kind of look every time. The last thing I want to mention before we show you our scores, the final boss fight looks amazing. They put a lot of detail on the Thon, and the dragon that comes through the wall, that looks awesome.
Brian, goddamn spoilers!
That dragon is no Drake. But as you see from our scores...
You should probably mention The Matrix. You seem to forget about The Matrix a lot.
Oh yes, The Matrix. Hell, it looks a lot better than a Super NES. It goes into a first-person perspective. I guess technically it's kind of a first-person over-the-shoulder perspective.
So third person?
I'd smack him, but he's right. Where you become the Silver Surfer, and you just fight random giant triangles and whatever the hell these things are.
They're computer security nodes!
Yes. Hey, it's different, it looks fine, but...
There's lightning!
Yes, there is lightning.
Oh boy!
I could only hold that back for so long. So anyway, as you see from our scores, I gave it a 6, Jim gave it a 7. Surprise, surprise, 90% of our scores, get used to mine being lower than Jim's, because he can't let go of nostalgia.
What?
And as far as beer, I will add 2 beers just because I would have loved to seen them throw a couple more boss battles, because they did it so well. But that's just me.
The sound we can keep pretty quick. The music I like a lot in this game. Trying to even keep nostalgia aside away from it, they're pretty well-constructed songs. When you're in the poorer and more ghetto areas, it's more somber. When you're in the busy urban cities, it's more fast-paced. When you're in the living mall area, it sounds almost like elevator music. And the tribal music in the forest areas actually sounds really cool and is a cool change of pace from the rest of the game. The sound effects are... okay, yeah, they could have been a lot better. There's very minimal voice work. The guns will sound different depending on the gun types, and you have that staticky smash sound for a lot of the magic attacks. But for the most part, it could have been a lot better here, and that kind of takes away from the scores. Overall, Bri gave it a 6 and I gave it a 7. The music's definitely the standout here. And as far as beer goes,
Jim, you might need a beer for that awesome voice work.
Oh, what, when you go into Jump House and he says, "Shooten now," which is German for Shadowrun? Did you know that?
Add 2 beers.
Alright, 1 for weak sound effect, and 1 for saying Shadowrun in German in the bar!
Nazis!
What? No, damn it, no!
As far as control is concerned, once again, this game is not perfect. However, it is a slight improvement over the Super NES. If you guys remember, that was a cursor-based game and made combat really annoying. Combat is still pretty rough in this game, especially in the beginning, because you are going to spend a lot of time just trying to maneuver away from an enemy when trying to shoot them, and your gun, before you upgrade it, has a slight delay, but that's not even our biggest problem. Our biggest problem is the menu system. Granted, it's an RPG, and most RPGs have pretty in-depth menu systems, but this one is so ridiculous, and it is such a more grindy game than the Super NES was. When you're in battle, I mean, just look at this. When he's in battle, you're constantly going in and out, trying to heal, just switch over. It's annoying, and I'm sorry, I hated the menu system. I felt like half of my time of this entire game was just dedicated to dicking around with my menu, and it just didn't feel that intuitive, if that makes any sense. Whether Jim agrees with all my points or not, we both ended up scoring it the same, and we gave it a 6. Like we said, it's definitely not perfect, but it's above average, and it's nothing that's going to completely ruin your gameplay experience. I'm just going to add 2 beers. One for the goddamn menu system, and one because grenades are useless in this game against any enemy that's moving. Look at this shit.
Alright, the gameplay. So like we said before, this is no longer the isometric kind of game. It's a top-down, third-person, but it's still real-time. The combat's real-time. This game is a lot more of almost a text-based adventure with real-time gameplay elements, because there is a ton of dialogue in this game and a lot of options. The story in this game, it's finished in a much different way than really a lot of games at the time. It's almost a little bit ahead of its time in how open-worldy it is. So you'll have a certain objectives and story-based events that you need to take care of, but you can do them in any fashion that you want. So you'll be way along in one chapter, almost, you could say, of a game, but another one you haven't even touched yet. And even more, the major plot points don't get done until you get all of a certain type done. It's kind of tough to explain, but let's just say there's certain checkpoints you have to hit in the story, and you can't progress until you hit all of them at certain points.
Sounds like the Super NES.
No, not the Super NES. The Super NES was very linear. You had to hit every story point.
Sounds like the Super NES.
Incorrect. Anyway, you get the different character classes from the beginning like many other RPGs of the time. So when you start, you can be the samurai, who's the fighter, the decker, who's good at hacking, or the shaman. The essence system is actually in this game much like in the RPG, where if you're a shaman, there's cyberware you can get to make your body stronger, but if you do it as a magic guy, it takes away from your magic ability, so there's that give and take. There's a lot more micromanaging, like Bri said, with the menus, with setting if you want your character to be attack or defense, what kind of items you want them to have, what kind of attacks you want them to use. It just feels like a more fleshed out RPG experience instead of a more actiony RPG like the SNES one was. Now that's also good and bad because this game is very grindy. It takes a long time to get your character leveled up. Truth be told, you do that with actual Shadowruns this time, which are the jobs that you get from the Johnsons. Some of them are more boring than others. You have escort missions, you have deliveries, you have corporate jobs where you go in and try to either rescue people from a corporation or steal packages, and you have Matrix runs. And honestly, the corporate jobs and the Matrix runs are probably some of the most fun. Well, there's also goal hunting, and that's always fun too.
Fuck's sake, wrap it up!
Alright. Long story short, this seems like much more of an in-depth RPG experience. So depending on whether or not you like to get that in-depth into it, will determine how much you like the game. So, Bri gave it a 6, I gave it a 9. And as far as beer goes, I'll add 1 beer just to keep you a little bit of a buzz during those long grind sessions.
The Originality. This is the second in the Shadowrun series, and honestly, there's once again not a ton here. Granted, from the Super NES, between the menu system, the ability to pick different classes, and a different story, we gave it points for that. But everything else you've pretty much seen. Now, Jim did mention, he wasn't as used to seeing an open world at this time that had those various checkpoints, but in reality, we've seen it in one way or another, so we couldn't exactly shower this game with points. So really, if you have played the Super NES game, there are some elements that have leaked over, and if you played enough other RPGs, you kind of know what to expect, but still, given the upgrades to the series itself, we felt this earned a 5. And as far as beer, I'm not even going to add a beer. I guess they were limited in how much they really could expand, other than keep giving you new storylines with this crazy world of Shadowrun.
As far as replayability goes, when it really comes down to a technical level, there isn't that much here. There's one story, and it's not going to change. Where you get your replayability is when you want to go back to it. You have so many different ways you can play the game. I already mentioned the 3 different classes, but you can basically pick and choose what missions you want to do, what gameplay styles you want to do. Hell, when I went back and replayed this, I almost never did any Matrix runs at all, because you don't have to. Or some games you can make all your money by doing the Matrix. So it's basically up to you to have the experience that you want. So long story short, we both gave it 6s. Definitely not the most options here, but you can make your own. And as far as beer goes, I'll give it 2 beers for the ability to or to not do things.
So overall, we've noticed in the comments, a lot of you seem to prefer this version of Shadowrun. And for me personally, I kind of felt the same about this as I did that game, where I played it, I appreciated it. However, the grindy nature and the micromanagement, it just kind of hindered my experience a lot. Jim, once again, he grew up with this, he loved the shit out of it, and you know what? That's his right to like this game as much as he does. So, as you see from the scores, I gave it a 6, Jim gave it an 8. When we combined all of our scores together, it rounds out to a 6.6. So it just edged out the Super NES title, but let's face it, that was mostly due to Jim's nostalgia.
Hey!
Since this is Jim's baby of a game, I'm going to let him close us up as long as he keeps it within a reasonable time frame.
Alright, so growing up, I wasn't really an RPG kind of guy. And to get maybe a little sentimental, one day my dad came home from a closed down West Coast video, and he brought home Streets of Rage 3, Eternal Champions, Predator 2, Universal Soldier, and this game. And when I first played it, I didn't know what the hell I was doing, and I didn't touch it again for 5 years. When I went back, I finally figured it out, and I don't know if this shaped me later on, but I kind of like more grind-heavy games. My only Final Fantasy game that I ever really liked was the first one. When I play Bethesda games, I like putting it on, say, Fallout New Vegas. I like putting it on hardcore mode, where you have to micromanage like crazy, and it's more grind-heavy. I don't know, it's just a game like this appealed to me more, and it established my love of cyberpunky crap that I had to this day. I'll freely admit it's not perfect, but even if this game kind of probably isn't for you, it's at least worth a playthrough because I like the story a lot. And yeah, that's about it.
When it comes to beer pairing, we're actually going to go with the Thunderhole Ale from the Bar Harbor Brewing Company. This is what we would consider a hidden gem. Granted, if you're not from the East Coast, you may not have ever heard of this beer, but it is a damn good English-style brown ale. And we wanted to go with something that had a lot of flavor, wasn't very well known, but much like this game, this is nostalgic for us, because that was one of our earliest beer reviews, and we still love it to this day. So pair these two together, and get yourself ready for one long-ass gaming experience. And remember to drink your beers and play your games responsibly. As always, guys, thanks for checking out this video, and if you enjoyed it, make sure you give us a thumbs up, leave some comments, or better yet, why not subscribe? Till next time, guys, cheers.